You snuck up on a big bro from behind. I could have gone my whole life without seeing a big bro's ass.
Hello! Hello, Douglas. It's me, a Barrel.
Gee, Mr. Barrel, why do you have such a weird face?
Just have a seat. You could sit on barrels, you know.
Back in 2019, I found myself in freshman year of college and got myself a new job at a Pizza Hut with much more flexible hours than my past job. After realizing that I can now take the weekend off, I decided to jump back into Twitch after going on and off for a while a part-time streamer, and I've streamed every Saturday ever since. One of the first games I played to start off my brand new commitment was Chrono Trigger 1 year ago. I heard it was a great game and got it for free on Steam, but it sat in my library for a while until I decided to sit down and play for a couple hours. To make a long story short, those 2 hours became 45 hours. It wouldn't be 2 months later until winter break, and I tried out Final Fantasy VII. It was on sale for like 99 cents, and I streamed it from start to finish all the way to late April. When I first left Midgar, it was like a little playthrough to see if I enjoyed it, and after that point, it became a 50-hour investment, and it was worth every minute. TLDR, I found out that I really like these types of video games. So what I wanted to do was look into some other games that I thought I would enjoy and research some games and other factors of what makes these types of games good. Games kind of where a player takes turns beating the shit out of each other for your entertainment. So today I'm going to be talking about some games I found or already played that you might want to try yourself. So get all cuddled up in your blankets, pour yourself a glass of Sprite Cranberry while it's still in stock, and lay back in your best chair because this is gonna take a while. Before we start, I want to let you know that turn-based RPG is the term I'm going to be using to describe what I'm going to be talking about. The reason I'm not talking about the entire genre is because it's kind of difficult to compress the entire genre in a single video. Concepts, improvements, and any other type of issue is going to be different in one subgenre, and in another it's not going to completely exist at all. So, of course it would be confusing as all hell to talk about the concept of how annoying slow combat is in a game, and then go ahead and talk about Secret of Mana, where the combat is in completely real time. Among other reasons, the genre itself is so wide that I wouldn't do any justice trying to inform you of it by giving a brief summary of the subgenre. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's ironically talk about the first RPG video game. One of the first RPG video games was Zork for the PDP-10, or Computer Before Computer for the people who don't know what that is. The game was text-based where a user would enter in a string of words to continue the story about a nameless adventurer searching for wealth and adventure. The goal is to complete several adventures to return to the great underground empire and achieve the title of Dungeon Master. It was inspired by the D&D based entertainment that's loved to this day. It was like Grand Theft Auto Online for people who didn't like spending $400 to enjoy Grand Theft Auto Online. However, one of the first console turn-based RPG games was Dragon Stomper on the Atari 2600. Rather than use a command line like in Zork, the game used a graphical interface to visually display information to the player. The visuals have dated since its debut in 1982, and looks like a broadside of a roast beef sandwich after dipping in some au jus sauce. I don't know how to say it. And it did its job and let a user know what's going on. Still a neat little game in the end. Give or take a couple years and with better hardware and game design knowledge, you start to have some repeat titles where a game gets more than one game and branches into a franchise. The more recognizable titles would be Final Fantasy, which started out on the NES and would go up to more than 15 titles as far as I'm willing to count. While the storyline's absolutely fucked and no two games are connected, some assets are kept such as the Chocobo or the Victory Fanfare so that every time you win, you won't forget what you're playing. Later on, another big boy would come out and shake up the gaming industry 20 years after its release. Mother, or Earthbound Zero, which was another game that started on the NES, had about 4 releases under its title. Now you might be scratching your head wondering what the hell are you fucking smoking, because there's only 3 games. Well, let me explain. So of course you had Mother 1 through 3, but you also had a Game Boy Advance port of Mother 1 plus 2. However, it had multiple issues ranging from the awful recreation of music on the hardware, because the Game Boy Advance kind of sucked. and the other issue where it was never even released in America. However, if you pre-purchased the game in 2003, you got an exclusive cell phone strap. Ooh. Other than that, you have Earthbound 64, or for the people who didn't know what a 64 disk drive is, nothing. However, there are photos and videos of gameplay, and allegedly demos were made to promote the game. If so, for the ones who want to see if someone can revive that, keep waiting. Yeah, there's really nothing to work on, seeing that this game is like other than screenshots in the IGN gameplay trailer. Now, of course, since this game would take years for it to be relevant, we wouldn't really see any form of legacy for the franchise, but there definitely was, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, as the end of the millennium was edging closer and closer, some development was made towards portability for video games. Of course, Nintendo would start this very early with the Game Boy in 1989. Some pretty cool games were on this gray brick and would be supported until well after its lifetime, so long in fact that it surpassed the SNES, N64, and GameCube by the time the Game Boy died out, and then was replaced by other generations like Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance. Now this is important to know because the Game Boy would contain one of the largest franchises of all time. While games from the 90s would have captured the hearts of countless gamers far and wide, no franchise would ever trump the big boy, Pokemon Red and Blue for the Game Boy. To compare it to other franchises in that time, Chrono Trigger made 2.3 million copies, Final Fantasy VII would sell 10 million, the Mana series in its entirety would sell 6 million, but Pokemon Red and Blue alone from the entire franchise would sell 31 million copies and is considered one of the best RPGs of all time. And from that point on, it would slam its way into pop culture harder than Mario Ballin'. It would have like 10 million TV shows and movies about animals. This ain't Crocodile Hunter. This is Pokemon 2000, bitch. What's the plot? I don't fucking know. But it's goddamn awesome if you tell me, even if I never played Pokemon before. God damn it, dude. Shit was poppin'.
Honestly, I don't see what they find so amusing about those things. They're so strange. Where are they from?
Well, it's some new big thing from Japan. I tell you, those Japanese really know how to market to kids.
So the core gameplay is about capturing multiple pocket monsters, hence the name Pokemon, and making them strong for the purpose of making them fight for a quick buck. But the plot of each game varies, where in the first game you just want to beat your rival brother, but later on the franchise would go and do some more crazy shit like take down the Mafia, or stop some James Bond the world is not fucking enough Mission Impossible one-dimensional world-wanting and/or ending bad guy. And maybe rinse and repeat for about 30 plus years with a slightly different motive to play the game, whether it be the scalpers from the TV show, or shut down the Mafia 40 hours after you just started your adventure. So what you had here was a game that was easy to learn, a simple game that was easy to follow, and later on would have the most dreadful low HP alert ever made that somehow gave anxiety a soundtrack.
I need a medic bag!
Now, Pokemon was pretty late in the game compared to the entire genre at the time. It was a little boring for people who don't like waiting, and I'm pretty sure the spin-off series Mystery Dungeon produced about 40% of the furry population, but Pokemon seemed to be a pretty good standard for reference for future titles. Which does lead to a question that I probably should have said before anything else, but I've been working on this script early since September, so I'm not changing it, so now, the question is, what makes a good turn-based RPG game? One thing that game developers like to do when making a new game is take a look at what made the game fun in one case and try to either copy it or improve on it. This allows games to progressively improve as each next big title of the year is going to try to top the previous. However, you shouldn't just do the same thing a good game does because it would be seen as a clone of another game. But in a genre like this, there really is not that much to improve, so you have to find a way to personalize your gameplay, whether it be implementing an inventory to gain an advantage, or something as simple as the rock paper scissors attack system that Pokemon implemented. So for the next segment of this video, I'm not going to be talking about some of the things that make an RPG good, and what makes you want to gouge your eyes out because Wally doesn't want to stop fighting you for the 30-second goddamn time. So, to be the nice and sunny man that I am, let's start with the things that make you a happy boy. Around the time RPGs were getting a little more popular, some games tried to implement a new approach to combat in their games. One of these would be the game not pausing for you to take a turn. This is called the Active Time Battle System, or ATB. This added more action than you'd think. In a game like Chrono Trigger, some enemies have an HP shed attack that either half your HP or straight up drop it to 1. This can get stressful sometimes because the enemy might use an HP shed on your entire team, and if you didn't upgrade your speed or have a teammate that can use rush, you might get caught in an ultimate attack. If your enemy deals more damage than your revive can handle, you're now in an unrecoverable state and will inevitably lose. So you want to make your player faster, and sometimes that's not even enough. So the best thing next after that is to turn tail and flee. Well, it's not the most intuitive feature, it still is important. If you happen to be in a place you should not be or just don't want to fight Wallowy again, see what I did there? The joke is that he never goes away. While you can just fight the enemy and risk losing health or even your life, you can't just run away like that. You kind of have to sacrifice a couple of resources. Sometimes it deducts coins or other resources like items that are in your inventory. However, I kind of find this a redundant feature because never once in any game I've ever played I've used the run feature because I'm kind of impatient, and sometimes it's kind of faster to just fight the damn enemy because it just still gives you XP that you always need to just beat a boss that you aren't even thinking of fighting yet. There is also positional combat, which is quite a neat and creative feature. For example, in Earthbound, when you get Paula in your party, she has a PSI ability that attacks a row of enemies. However, some games have an enemy position as a feature. Using Chrono Trigger again, some enemies will physically attack the player closest to them, or need to get close to a player to deal a big hit. Final Fantasy VII also had this mechanic, where some materia attacks had an area of effect. The game also had this frog-looking character that would one-hit kill a player if he got close enough. More than likely, the player would just be smart enough to run away because he's a damage sponge. However, in the arena in Gold Saucer, you might need to fight this dude and hope to God he doesn't beeline for you. Typically, when you play an RPG, you will need to fight an enemy to gain XP, but the way you get in a fight could vary. Traditionally, you could just get in a fight based off how many units of the map you ran. However, some games will let you see the enemies you fight. You could easily run away from them or run into them to start a fight. While you could just get into a fight, the best fight to be in is an unfair fight. Based on the game you're playing, you could just get a first hit in a fight based off of where you're positioned. But what if you just don't feel like fighting a weak opponent? Easy. Just have the game auto-skip the fight, or in Mother 3's case, have the enemy knock away from you. And although this is a really big curveball compared to other factors, one of the most recognized features of any game would be the Vault-Tec assisted targeting system from Fallout. Although it's not that big in the first games, it was the coolest shit when Fallout 3 came out. At the cost of AP, you can take a chance for a guaranteed hit or even a critical limb shot so the enemy can't fire or run away. The further you were from an enemy, the less chance you get for a clean shot. But when your life is on the line and the only thing between life and death is the 10mm that you still won't let go, just know that you have great value LMAO box on your side. Oh, and with the Bloody Mess perk, slow-mo shooting an enemy becomes a spectacular form of art. But you know what isn't art? Clunky, unfixable issues that take away the experience from a player enough to make them stop playing. One way or another, you're going to encounter a frustrating mechanic in a game that makes you just want to wish that it died in a feature game, but you also know deep inside it's there to make you seem like you're doing something in the game, but it's arbitrarily extending the time to play to make it feel like you're making your money's worth. One of the most recognizable offenders would be grinding. In order to progress, in some cases, you need to repeatedly encounter weaker enemies to farm XP or currency. Even when not grinding, enemy encounters are sometimes pointless and get annoying after a while. The easy way out of these issues is to have lots of different enemies with different styles of combat. This allows a lot more creativity in your work as well because you have to consider that the best enemies are the ones you don't really expect. Sometimes you have to build enemies that fill an entire regional play space, like the blue worshippers in Happy Happy Village where they all worship the color blue. You wouldn't want to have a wide range of colors because it wouldn't make sense, so what you got are these really poorly thought out enemies that could easily be mistaken for some other organization. Some games found a way to prevent grinding or unnecessary fights by having an auto fight system, where if you obviously can one-shot the enemy, it'll skip the whole thing and give you the XP instantly. Of course you won't really use this a lot because it'll give you a minuscule amount of XP compared to fighting an equal enemy, but there's still the option. But what is more annoying than several enemies that you can just one-shot for minuscule XP is one enemy that has 3 phases and each one getting more and more difficult. This often causes the player to become exhausted from having to fight extremely tough fights in rapid succession with no chance for a respite. One recognizable example is in Final Fantasy VI, where you have to fight Kefka 4 fucking times, and if you don't have a dedicated Ultima spam, it's gonna be a fucking ass-whipping. However, sometimes this feels kind of pointless if you already have the best equipment and attacks, because then it feels like it feels less like you're fighting an actual threat to the world, and more like drop elbowing a baby. Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII was a threat in the start of the game, and to this day, his first moment when you realize how terrifying his abilities are, you can't just help but give a little adjustment in your seat from being uncomfortable. It emphasized how powerful he was simply by making Cloud and him fight next to each other, and the difference is just night and day. But when One-Winged Angel comes on, and you're about as ready as you're ever gonna be, you expect the battle to be just fucking legendary, and it'll be a footnote of your experience of gaming. But in reality, it's over in like 2 turns because Knights of the Round Table go, he summons the fucking thing, and he's like, oh, and then the fucking lights goes up, and the screen goes black as he goes in, and then this guy just comes in with a fucking sword, and then this guy with a fucking spear, electric polka comes out, and then he's like, look at me, I'm not swording again. And then this guy comes out with the fucking ice, and he's like, oh! And then he comes spinning around. This guy comes out with fucking rocks, and gets like, and then this guy comes, and he's like, and then he's like, Axeman, and he's like, oh! And then he's like, oh, look at me, I have a fucking sword, and I'm gonna slash you. And then the fucking scatter scream. And then you have to do that like 2 times, and then the match is over. Games like Earthbound or Chrono Trigger in some cases have a point in the game where once you go into the finale, the player cannot back out for a refresher from an extremely harsh fight. The game sometimes is going to be generous enough to have a recovery point, but it's usually going to be at the very start, and there's nothing more frustrating than have to restart all over again when you were that close to winning. Now, let's assume you just lost a battle. In some games, you just have to go back to where you saved and you lose all your progress before that point. Don't have much beef with that one because there has to be a consequence for losing, whether it be losing your money or having a whole ass cutscene where it just shows how badly you fucked up by having the dude who gave you the warning way back in the early game about lava says the world just fucking dies and then just leaves you with the haunting message that any gamer in a 3-mile radius gets a Yoda Order 66 stumble. However, some games want to punish you more than just a measly mentally scarring moment. For example, dying in the Mother franchise is the worst thing that can happen to you. Almost everything you do requires money, like food, calling your dad, reviving a teammate. Now, when you go lose a battle, all your friends are in a down state where they can't gain XP or help you progress through the game. So to solve that, you have to spend a bunch of money to get them back in the game, but that's still not it. You still have to get some sleep for filling up your psychic power, and by the time you get set up, it might be about 10 or 20 minutes until you get back to where you were, and you're still going to be at risk of going back to the start. But despite all these big bug issues, some games were able to prevent, if not avoid them from distracting your experience, by either using improvements I stated earlier, and sometimes just removing annoying issues like grinding altogether. However, turn-based RPGs kind of have an issue, or that a gimmick or mechanic can't fix. Firstly, most RPGs are a huge investment, and sometimes have no replayability beyond the 16 endings you know goddamn well you're not doing. Along with that, you also still have this niche genre at a time when sports and actions and balls-to-the-wall gameplay are a greater necessity for your personal library than some game about fucking eco-terrorists, or some kids drop-kicking a cosmic baby. Fortunately, we didn't have to wait long until the future, when fans and some companies that had a lot of time and skills to find out that the best way to make a game have more replayability is usually the simplest: copy off your classmates. To start, let's talk about modding games that already exist. It's the best way to make a game have a longer lifetime by changing the game's source that turns Half-Life 2 into a 4-hour shitpost. The one type of modding I'm going to be talking about, however, is randomizers, where assets are swapped around. This can make a game harder or easier in some cases, where you could either get the best weapon or get a stick that just says dead end. A game also like Pokemon would be a perfect game for randomizers simply because it changes things up a bit. In a way, it feels natural to have enemies randomized because the game has a rock, paper, scissors type of strategy. While the higher level player is always going to win, in an equal match, it requires that you have to stop and think what you're going to do. Now, hold on a minute. So if you can remix gameplay in an already existing game, what happens when we put another game series and drop it in that genre? Well, I don't know. I don't think that would work out, you know, especially when you have to consider that you have to...
Hey, motherfucker! Come here and give me your liver!
So in the 16-bit era of gaming, Nintendo wanted to try to introduce their players to some games they otherwise would not have tried out at all, just by plastering Mario's face on various games and genres to make the game more likely to be played. One of these games that Nintendo tried to do was Mario RPG. There's not much to say about the game other than Geno for Smash, but other than that, the game would bear 2 franchises. So, Paper Mario is where you are Mario, but you're made out of paper. Okay, so to elaborate better, it was a series of games that tried to follow the first Mario RPG's gameplay, but it was made in a style that made the environment look like it came out of a pop-up book, from what I assume Nintendo was going for. The gameplay from each game varies from an engaging fight to a straight-up gimmick. One issue that I noticed when looking at the series critically is that while the combat system is fundamentally the same, the mechanics are greatly different each time, for better or for worse. And when we had the odd one out to discuss, Super Paper Mario on the Wii, which deviated from the core gameplay and doubled down on the platforming instead. The story's definitely a lot more fleshed out than any of the other games, as the franchise wouldn't exactly have the best plots, the first one literally being we gotta find the princess and you've gotta help us, and often the series relied on the gameplay for it to be fun. Whether you like the new approach to this series or never want to see it again, it's up to you. Except it isn't, because it was never implemented again and Nintendo stuck with the turn-based gameplay. This isn't exactly surprising for there to be a rejection from the audience when there's a deviation from the original formula, which can be found all over the gaming industry, such as Raiden being the main character in Metal Gear Solid 2, or the core gameplay of The Legend of Zelda 2 being a side-scrolling view. Sometimes changing things up brings a breath of fresh air and new ideas if a developer sticks to it and lets it shine. But Paper Mario is in a place where no matter what they try to do, it's going to bring a negative response. It partially has to do with the gameplay, usually relying on a gimmick that could hinder the experience greatly. In Sticker Star, I tried to build a unique combat system where you use a consumable item to attack. The downside is that there's no level system, and basic attack gameplay is locked away by the consumable system that was implemented. This could have been easily fixed by having the combat not rely on the sticker system, but as a default ability like in the first games, where all your special attacks are like a flower or even a special sticker, I forget the name for, but now you only get 1 or 2 pages to hold all the stickers. So now you make a player think that they could stock up on all these regular specials that would allow you to wipe out large groups, but then you won't have the big sticker that could wipe out the boss. Decisions. In every X levels, you get a new page and an ability to convert bad stickers into shiny stickers for a simple fee. So now you get an incentive to fight, instead of it being some arbitrary game mechanic that you want to try to avoid. Overall, the franchise has its ups and downs, but because each game is so different, their approach to the series is going to widely differ. I grew up with Sticker Star, whereas someone else would say I'm a dumb fuck and missed out on a 1,000-year door, and then some other dude would go and say how much of a loser he is, because the first one is the best one, and so on and so on. So, yeah, Paper Mario doesn't exactly have a track record of attracting a positive audience. You're usually going to get the jaded contrarian who thinks the game was never good, then you get the enthusiast that enjoys all the games regardless, and then you get the ancient critics, which somehow have a more inconsistent voice than both fanboys and contrarians. Yeah, we're talking about regressionists. These people are the ones who want their content to be exactly like the original work, and reject any change that may or may not make the game better. The problem with this thought process is that when a franchise does do this, it's usually more likely to fail because it can't bring anything new to the table and becomes complacent and stale. That doesn't stop people from wanting it though, so I guess people just really like to stick to the formula. Speaking of not changing the ups, I almost forgot about the other franchise. The Mario and Luigi games for the most part were exclusively on portable handheld systems and would start off on the Game Boy Advance while its later titles would release on the DS and 3DS. Now this franchise is rather personal for me because it was what introduced me into RPGs. I played Bowser's Inside Story around the end of 4th grade but never got past the first part of the game because my DS had a broken R trigger, and for about a couple years my experience just went like that. It was just that far until I fixed the button and then cleaned it up, and then I went to play it on my Memphis trip back when I was in a band, and I had all week to just do whatever I wanted. That whole time, I would just play that game, and I got all the way to the end. Just to put it in one word, damn. I'm not sure if it's just nostalgia talking, but I don't think I've ever played a game that made me want to play it more than once intentionally. That said, let's talk about the shit that this game did that made me enjoy it. First off, the game made the turn-based combat fun and made you want to get into the fights rather than to avoid them. What they did was they made the player have to actually interact with the game rather than spam A really fast like in Final Fantasy, and you just wish that the enemy would just fucking just... When attacking, you don't just do it, you press at the right time, and then bam, you just now dealt more damage. But that's not where it ends though. The enemy needs to attack now, so do you just watch it happen? Fuck no, you just get ready to avoid that shit. And sometimes an attack allows you to counter that attack and then deal more damage even when it's not your turn. It was fucking great. One more thing that they did that made special attacks special was that they deal heavy hits, but that wasn't just it. In Final Fantasy VII, when you use a summon materia, it dealt shitloads of damage. But when you use them, you had to watch an FMV of your summon do something so badass like... And then it was over. After the third time, you just kind of got sick of using it because it took like 30 seconds to do that, and it completely halted all forward momentum of the gameplay just to show you that FMV. However, in Mario & Luigi, you had a great little minigame where you just do something like press a button on demand, or press as fast as possible, or even aim at something. On Mario's sides, you had the buttons, but on Bowser's side, you had the touchpad for those to keep things fresh. And these were a lot of these games that entertained you, even if something as mundane as point and tap a lot. You were also able to practice these games and even had challenges that were exclusively the special attacks to see how long you can go. And as you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of this game. I'm pretty sure this was the main reason I played more RPGs than I thought I would if I didn't. But the issue I have with the later games is the same reason I spent a whole paragraph talking about regressionists. It didn't change anything significant. Beyond Bowser's Inside Story, the gameplay would never really change unless it was a gimmick introduced and never implemented in the next game. Dream Team felt like the copycat of Bowser's Inside Story, where you had to interact with Luigi while sleeping so you can continue in his conscience. There also was Starlo, which was a staying character after Inside Story, and really had nothing really to bring to the table other than being a yellow Navi that just told you to do and where to go, and because Mario can't communicate with the player, obviously. There also was the crossover between Paper Mario, but all that did was make it so that rather than having 2 people to manage, you now had 3. Big fucking strides you're making their video game. There also is the other topic regarding the art style being changed from pixelated sprite work to a style that follows the box art. Kind of. Not much to say other than I don't like it, but again, I guess Nintendo thought that giving us the same game in this style would sell a lot like hotcakes. It didn't. So you know, earlier when I was talking about the fandom and all that other shit I was talking about in like an earlier video, I kind of said that because my other video about that topic didn't really do much justice talking about that issue from games that actually have that fan base, other than, oh, some people drew sans porn and I didn't like the science dinosaur and something like that. And holy, let's talk about that Undertale now, because I just did a piss poor job explaining why it was a good game in the previous video.
Hello everyone, it is I, the great Papa- What the fuck?
Inspired by previous RPG games in the past like Earthbound, Toby Fox created his own game called Undertale. And you can pretty much tell how much he was inspired by Earthbound that he actually tried to use some of the witty dialogue that Earthbound's known for to fit into his own humor. Also, as a little bonus, in his own song, you can tell he sampled assets from Earthbound's soundtrack as a palette for his own song, Amalgam, which kinda makes it a double meaning when you think about it. Now, the importance of Undertale and its core gameplay is that so many other games, in or out of its genre, try to maybe succeed to make the player be introduced in this big bad arsenal of attacks and other kinds of shit you can do with it to wipe out any enemy, and then tell you you can't do it if you want the ending you want. A kind of big issue with games that do this kind of gameplay is that it isn't really implemented through gameplay, and instead decide to wait until the very end to just say, well, since you shot that dude 7 hours ago, I guess you just now have to see the bad ending. Now, of course, it's better to give a player options, but when you make it that you can't use this variety of items the game gives you to do awesome shit that drive you forward in the game, a player's not gonna want to bother with that shit and just go for the path of lethal resistance because the ending's practically arbitrary anyway. So where does this put Undertale? To start, before you even get a chance to play the game, it lets you know that you can play through the game without killing anyone, which now sets an expectation for you that you're not going to kill a single thing. Wait, that wouldn't mean combat's absolutely pointless then, right? Well, no. In the story, you fell down and can't get back from where you came. The player doesn't get a choice to be in a fight because everyone in the cave wants you dead, so they can leave the place they were banished to forever. However, they can leave if they just kill you, so they can destroy that barrier. This is where the writing integrates with the gameplay. The enemies fight you not because they're evil, it's like it's some fucking highlight motherfucker, it's because the ones attacking you are desperate and want to get out. While a player can just plow through enemies and relieve them of their XP, Toby Fox tried to change things up with the mercy option. This allows the player to let the enemy leave after convincing them not to fight in whatever the game tries to get them to. And not only that, the option to fight is still there. There's nothing stopping you from just going postal and just wreaking havoc. So to remove the stiffness of turn-based combat, the game implemented bullet hell like minigames where the enemy attacks. Each one is unique, and some are more lethal if combined with another enemy. Avoid the attacks, now you get to do something else. It keeps the player interested while not getting too boring because you get a lot of variety within the 8 hours of gameplay the game gives you. Now that I did a better job in explaining the game, let's talk about the other problem this game has. It's kind of a magnet for some interesting people. Now, initially I was reluctant to playing Undertale because the only people I knew who even played the game was a guy I knew from high school called Peyton. I stopped hanging out with him after he posted unspeakable things to my friend's Google chat, so that kind of set my expectations there a bit. At least I found out why his favorite color is orange. I kind of think that I was trying to say that in my previous video. The audience the game attracts kind of impacts whether or not a person who hasn't played it yet will even attempt to try it out. If I didn't play the game in October for shits and giggles, I might not even played it at all, and I wouldn't even be talking about this game in the first place. I know I kind of went off the rails a bit on this topic, but I wanted to elaborate a bit better when I was making my earlier video because I don't think I got my point through. Alright, so now that we resolved that, let's just head over to what we have to look forward to in the current status of the genre. In the current state, most games are now trying to deviate from turn-based gameplay simply because our gamer brains find this way more interesting than this. So much so that games like Final Fantasy XV and even the 7 remake remove turn-based combat altogether in exchange for real-time hack and slashing, which do two things. One, it complicated the game because now you have to do a tutorial that barely even does a good job explaining how to play the game. And two, enemies are now damage sponges because combat is absolutely pointless as hell and provide no strategy other than deciding what comically large sword to use to beat up the evil dude, and have a deep storyline to go with it. Oh, and also let's just have a boss that takes an hour to beat, and oh yeah, he can knock you away so it's seen as a runaway, and oh yeah, if you try to go back to the boss after being thrown away, it goes back up to full health, meaning you have to go to mindlessly hack at some fucking rock for another hour, that you just might as well play Desert Bust in this shit. Oh, and oh yeah, it's gonna take about 6 hours to beat all the bosses side by side. Final Fantasy VII Remake has a separate issue. The combat is great in this game, but the story is just really prolonged for no reason. For those who don't know, the original game takes about 45 hours to finish if you're really good at the game and are a completionist. This game takes about 45 hours, but it's entirely the first 5 hours of the game relative to the original title. When I heard that, I thought it was a joke, but no, they actually did it, and they're selling people that shit for $60. To try to compensate, they pulled the old reliable alternate timeline bullshit because that's not lazy story writing at all or anything. I already didn't like the story at the start, honestly. I don't like the end of the game. I want to admit that there was an attempt to make the game look awesome. I mean, just look at this game, dude. It's awesome to see what they were able to do. The music's pretty fucking chill as well, with an orchestral interpretation of the original songs that are fun to compare and contrast to. I also noticed the subtle hint of the story being different than what you were expected, because they changed the song One Winged Angel and remixed it in the final fight.
But when you actually fight Sephiroth, it's hilariously easy to beat him, because all he just does is just fly around with one wing, get it? And either just use materia spam or throw a train at you every once in a while. But when you do a one-on-one with Sephiroth in the cutscene, he's now untouchable? Like, come on, man. I just wanted to fight like that. I played the game. I wanted to do that. Just let me fight him, dude. I know that it must have been hard to make a game look this good and it will always look amazing to me, but god damn it, dude. I felt like I just bought the director cut of this game sometimes. From what I could tell, there probably was a language barrier or something that made the English version skim a lot of acting.
You bet! To get free shit? Not my style. You wanna live? Then get the hell out of town. Like I give a shit. Same shit. Really sorry about your ass.
Good job, guys. Great.
The hell? If they do decide to deploy it, then our best bet would be to run like hell.
Wow, I really can't move my body.
Now, although the version of the other side of the continent's going to be better almost always, at least it's nice to even have it in America at all, compared to some other games. Despite being made in 2006, it never released beyond Japan, and to this day, people are still wondering when the hell Nintendo's ever gonna release the goddamn game so I can experience it in better hardware. Especially since there's a greater incentive to get them out for people to play now than ever before. Motherwood had an official release on America, and Earthbound had a re-release not much later. The problem with this is that the games were available to buy off the Wii U shop, so unless you want to use the black brick that nobody wants to have, then it's a shame because these are pretty goddamn good games, and arguably, Mother 3 is the best of all of them, because it fixed any issues people had with its previous titles, while also having the most interesting and unusual story out of any other I played. So much so, that the main character, Lucas, isn't even a playable character beyond the opening until chapter 4 of 7. Other than the story, the mechanics are the best of the three as well, with quicker gameplay, interactive combat, even speedier auto fights where if you run at the weak enemy, it's going to be knocked back and stunned so you don't have to fight it. Now of course, we now have to address the elephant in the room. Why is Nintendo holding this game that universally is loved by anyone who plays it, and not releasing it whatsoever? So, to start off, the rating from this game is kind of a bit unjustified. I mean, this rating is the equivalent of a PG rating for Deadpool. The game has parts where you get drugged or have alcohol on screen. Also, there are several times where a person has harsh language or commit violence to one another. A very specific example I found was the part where you talk to a person from a specific angle and they respond with something along this.
For some reason, I like being talked to from behind like that. What?
But that can't be the issue by itself, can it? They can just cut it out like they did with Earthbound where the bar was a cafe in the NTSC version. I was thinking about this until YouTuber Nerl makes a video about this very issue and kinda gave me a whole aspect I completely forgot. The Mad Gypsies. So for anyone who hasn't played Mother 3, Mad Gypsies are entities that don't have a gender and are important for about half the game. Pretty much, you're gonna see these people a lot, and you can't exactly cut them out because they're important to the story. Now I know this is quite a big stretch and it's not the first time we've seen this happen. For example, Chrono Trigger had a boss fight with a person who looks like a girl but isn't. But it does seem like something as minuscule as having a genderless character is going to spark some controversy. I know you probably don't agree with me, and I don't expect you to. I kind of agree with you too. But did you see what happened not too long ago with Black Ops Cold War? There was a massive shit show over Bell having the option to be non-binary. Shit was flying, windows were breaking, mass bases complaining ensued, Twitter was in flames, Activision got richer, and it's still going on. So don't be surprised that Nintendo isn't going to release a game that's going to hit a nerve with a community that's already shown that they can barely handle a fucking virtual character not having a gender in a fictional game. But if you do get the chance, play the game. It's worth it. You can find it, like, on the internet. Just, like, go. Like, right there. MOTHER 3. And just look it up there. It's right there. And you can play it. Go. Do it. Well, what do we have here? When I was researching this section of the game, I found some fan-made remakes of a beloved franchise like Chrono Resurrection, where it made everything in the original game, but it made it 3D. But thanks to the copyright law existing, the wonderful cease and desist came over and said bye-bye. So what does a game dev do when they don't want to risk losing all their work just because it's used in another IP? One of the biggest examples I found was way back in January 2nd, 2020, when I was just browsing on Reddit when some dude was complaining about how the devs for Mother 4 changed the game to be independent. I was completely oblivious to this game, so you'd expect me to be pretty fucking excited about that, so I go and research this game now called Oddity. As it turns out, this game goes back all the way to 2013, and has a big following even after the rebrand. To put that in perspective, Cyberpunk 2077's first announcement was that year, and Yandere Simulator would be open for people to try out next year. So I have no idea how I never heard about it until the rebrand. But that's not where it ends with the past. It has an official soundtrack or soundtrack made by composer Shane Mesa, and also this dude named Nelward, who both have albums and other songs that you can go and listen to right now. And you should, because their music is fucking awesome. And also Nelward's new song has a bad word in it, so be careful. Other than that, you also have the fan Discord server that has game devs and even Shane Mesa himself. And also me, who exclusively goes on 2 channels and contributes nothing but a nitro boost. So yeah, that's cool. I'm hyped for this game now. When can I play it? Well, firstly, there was a reason the game was rebranded. No, I'm not the most qualified to assume why they rebranded, but as far as I know, it was obviously to avoid a copyright takedown like what happened with other fan-made games that used Nintendo IPs. That being said, that means there's probably a lot of content that the devs can't use that they may have made over the years. Imagine working on a 20-page script only to be told you had to start over and it can't be like what you just wrote. That's kind of what this is like. So, it might take a while for the game to come out, so relax till then. I think that even though the genre took a little bump in recent years, I think that the games are only going to get better. We had plenty of new games like Origami King and even a whole group of developers rebuilding a franchise from scratch. So, what was the point of me making this video? I don't know, man. I just like some of the games in the genre, which you could probably tell in like 40% of my videos. Some of the best fun I had was from just accidentally finding some game and then finding out it was Chrono Trigger. I got Final Fantasy VII for like 99 cents and I practically jump-started my entire video making career just by this game. It was just that enjoyable that I spent 12 hours, no joke, playing that game off of stream just to play it. That said, this video is going to double as an update to my Twitch channel. I'm updating my stream schedule so I can get more time on my hobby, as I got a lot more free time compared to last semester. I can now stream Sundays, same time as Saturday and maybe Wednesday, depending on how next semester is going to go out. It took a while, but their Mother Trilogy Marathon is going to be going on back on schedule after some mishaps came along. So, if you aren't on my Twitter, I actually have the entire thing going on. So let me go ahead and explain it to you. So, I use an actual Super Nintendo for the game, and I use a capture card for the thing. So what happened was the Elgato died, and so did the CMOS battery, so I lost all my progress, and I can't record myself doing that. So it took a while, and I'm sorry if anyone was... I'm pretty sure nobody here gives a shit, but if you want to watch it, there's the option. But I want to try to get Mother 3 played before April 20th, which is Mother 3's release date. Until then, check out the channel, have some fun. Be sure to check it out, because I just said it. And have a nice day. Bye.